Tre'Davious White is back, and he's a man on a mission.
You are Locked On Bills, your daily Buffalo Bills podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Bills Mafia? It's Joe Marino, author of the Herd Mentality Substack, co-host of the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast, co-host of the NFL First Read podcast, and I am your host of Locked On Bills. Want to thank you for making Locked On Bills your first listen every day, and a big welcome and shout out to our everydayers. You know who you are. Those of you who never miss a single episode, I appreciate y'all being here very, very much. I'd also like to invite you to subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Well, folks, welcome in. The Buffalo Bills have now completed 3 training camp practices, and we have some stuff to reflect on today. We heard from Bobby Babich. We had a big-time standout on the field, injury updates. I've got a couple of segments of herd mentality lined up as well today, so a loaded episode. But to me, the big story coming out of day 3 is Tre'Davious White. And that started with Bobby Babich's press conference. And he was asked about Tre'Davious White, and he said Trey White is on a mission right now. And expanded on that a little bit when there was a follow-up question asked, and he said, you know, what does that really mean? And Babich said that he had a conversation with Trey the other day, and Trey said it's good to have some legs and that he's finally had an off season. And yeah, he's 30 years old now and turns 31 in December. But when you think about it, it really is the first time that he's not spending his offseason rehabbing from an injury. He's spending his offseason getting ready to play cornerback in the NFL. And we know what Trey White has done in this league. I still don't know what to expect. But there's been positive reports out of camp 3 days in a row, and I'm excited to see it. I'll be at camp all next week. I'm taking in 5 practices next week, and I'll be giving you firsthand reports after practice. I'm excited to see what he looks like with my own eyes, but there's a consensus saying that he looks really good. And then you listen to Trey White after practice, and I've listened to every word that Trey White said as a member of the Buffalo Bills, and this was different. This was absolutely different. I've never heard him talk like he talked during that press conference after practice. He was straight up asked, should anybody be surprised if you're the starter opposite of Benford this year? He said, no. I put in a lot of expletive work. It's going to be a great expletive season. And the dude just was brimming with confidence. And you think of Trey White as this like charismatic, goofy guy with a lot of personality, vibrant. But man, he's a competitor too. You don't achieve the levels of play that he did in the National Football League without being highly competitive. And there was something about the way that he spoke where he wanted to let you know it wasn't just this cute comeback, right? Where everybody loves him and he loves everybody and he's thankful for the organization and the fans. Now, this is a dude that's here to earn a job. He said that. He's here to earn the trust of his teammates, that he can do whatever is necessary in a game. And he's not going to make it easy on Max Hairston. He's not going to make it easy on him. And that's good. That's what you want. You want Max Hairston in a position where he knows he's got to earn everything. And it's 3 days in a row that he's taken the first reps of the day with the starters. Trey White, that is. So this is a really compelling battle. And between what Babich said, between what Trey's doing on the field and what Trey White has now communicated to everybody, I'm perked up a little bit. I'm excited to see this play out. Wouldn't be a bad thing if the Bills had a bunch of corners that can play. How many times we've been to the end of the year and we're playing the Kansas City Chiefs Benford goes down. Trey White's not available. And Dane Jackson's having to cover number one receivers. Kyrie Elam's got to come in and play. This team is positioned to have some really good depth. I'm excited to see how this comes together with Trey White. And I'm rooting for him. I'm rooting for Max Harrison. I'm rooting for all these guys. So hopefully we're all beneficiaries of this great competition that appears to exist at cornerback. Bobby Babich was asked about Maxwell Hairston. And he said, we can't ride the roller coaster. He said, day one was pretty good. Day two, we've got some things to fix. And the good news is we got to practice today. Pretty different from what he said about Trey White. We got a lot of time ahead of us. There's a lot that has to play out. We're 3 days into camp, right? Pads have not even come on. But this is a really, really compelling battle. On the injury front, I think the Bills got through the Friday practice healthy. It didn't seem like any reports shared that there was new injuries, but AJ Epinesa on Thursday injured his ankle. Dorian Williams had a calf injury. They both missed on Friday. And then Dawson Knox with a hamstring, Cedric Van Pran Granger with a calf, Spencer Brown with the back, and Laviska Shenault all missed again with a lower leg strain. So 6 of the 91 not able to go on Friday. Bobby Babich was also asked about Jordan Hancock, which continues to be one of the most fascinating new additions to this team because we don't really know what he's going to do, right? And Bobby Babich continued to let us know that they don't know either. He said the idea right now is to build a repertoire of positions and figure out what he's best at, give him reps here and there, and figure out the role. Cool. That'll be fun to watch that play out. Babich was asked about Cole Bishop. And it was interesting. He's asked this question about Cole Bishop, and he starts talking about today's youth and anxiety and how he's got a couple of high schoolers and talked about social media. And he said the biggest difference for Cole Bishop this year is the removing anxiety and just staying in the process is what he said. He goes, quote, Bishop knows that he's a second-round pick. He knows he's talented. He knows what the expectations are. And maybe as a rookie, that was something he didn't handle as well. I've always had, and I've said this a lot on the podcast, I've always had this thought listening to Cole Bishop, and I've said it before. It's like he's drinking through a fire hose, and I'm sure there's a lot that goes into it, right? You're a young man. You're in the National Football League. The lights couldn't be brighter. You got a complex system to learn. You got to go perform. There's people counting on you. You're stepping in for Jordan Poyer and Micah Hyde. There's probably a lot baked into that, right? Sometimes we forget the human element and just say, okay, second-round pick, super talented, athleticism, size, go be a good player. Well, there's a lot that goes into that. And so it was interesting to see Bobby kind of take that approach when discussing Cole Bishop. Talking about Joey Bosa, and the approach there is to make sure he's healthy, and he affirmed that they view Bosa as a 3-down guy. So I don't know if that means that he won't be just a long and late down guy, but they're looking at Bosa as a 3-down player. And, they said obviously the approach and everything they do is to make sure that he's as healthy as possible. And so we know that a couple days ago on Thursday, he didn't really do any of the team practice. He did individual drills. And so I think on a day-to-day basis, the workload in practice is going to be different for Joey Bosa, as the idea there is to make sure that he's ready to go on Sundays. Babich said during the press conference that he was disappointed that the defense only had one takeaway so far through 2 days of practice. Well, Friday came and Taylor Rapp had 3 interceptions. That's a lot. That's a lot even for a training camp practice. 3 picks. And so I continue to tell you, don't sleep on Taylor Rapp. They love this guy. He's an outstanding tackling safety, and obviously 3 interceptions today, but just think about the big plays that he's made on the ball for the Bills in games, right? The game sealing interception against Miami to win the AFC East, and coming out of that 2023 season, interception against Baltimore in the playoffs last year, interception against Kansas City in the regular season win, big fourth quarter interception against the Colts to kind of help win that game. I mean, Rapp should be well positioned here now that it's his 3rd year on the team to really have such an intimate knowledge of everything that they want to accomplish defensively and go out there and execute. Loved what Bobby Babich had to say about Joe Andreessen. They said they're putting a lot on his plate. He said he's no longer Buffalo Joe. He's Joe Andreessen, the football player. And it just feels like just the progression just feels really good for Joe Andreessen. He's a player I'm really excited to get eyes on next week. Here's one thing that I thought was really interesting. He was asked about TJ Sanders, the Bills' second-round pick out of South Carolina, the defensive tackle. And he answered the question by saying, TJ's a personality. And I didn't really know much about TJ Sanders and the personality. I know about the skill set, right? I watched him play a ton at South Carolina. I evaluated him. But I didn't know much about his makeup, like what type of dude he was. And that was the first thing that Bobby said about him. And then Ed Oliver met with the media after practice, and he said that TJ Sanders reminds him every single chance that he gets that he's old. Now, Ed Oliver's only 28, right? He's gonna turn 28 in December, but feels like TJ Sanders is, that's two pretty big comments about his personality. And I'm excited to get to know that a little bit more. And, hopefully we'll see some on Hard Knocks, and hopefully we'll continue to kind of get little snippets of it here in the coming weeks. All right, so that's kind of the high-level updates on what happened. Trey White continued to take first-team reps. Tylan Grable in at right tackle for Spencer Brown. Cole Bishop continues to be the starter across from Taylor Rapp. Mitch Trubisky got the QB2 reps on Friday. So those are the big updates for what happened during practice, and I'm very excited next week when I'm down there. I want to get really specific on, what's popping for me, who's performing at a high level, where I think maybe there's some concern. So a lot of those thoughts will start really coming on the podcast next week when I'm there for 5 practices. So you have that to look forward to next week. And coming up in the next 2 segments, it's herd mentality. I've got some great questions lined up that we will attack. So folks, be sure to stick with me. We've all been there, logging on early and waiting forever for concert tickets to go on sale, only to lose your spot for a show that you've been dying to see. Live music should be about making memories, not dealing with the stress of ticket shopping, and that's where Game Time comes in. Game Time makes getting concert tickets faster and easier than ever. Prices actually drop as it gets closer to showtime. You could save up to 60% off with their killer last-minute deals. Ever wonder what your view will actually look like when you get to the venue? Well, the app shows you a panoramic seat view, so there are no surprises. Speaking of no surprises, with Game Time, the price you see is the price you pay. There's no hidden fees. So take the guesswork out of buying concert and show tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, folks, let's do a couple of segments of herd mentality. I've got 6 questions queued up here to dive into. I do want to remind you, though, as part of my time at training camp next week, I'm going to be part of a live event on Wednesday, July 30th. It's in Rochester at the Focus Theater. It's called Tailgate Talk with Joe Marino. The tailgate will be at 6:30, and then we'll do a live podcast at 7:30. It is a ticketed event, and I do want to let you know that you can get those tickets through a link in today's show notes. So click on the show notes. You can get those tickets. And they're going fast. There's not much left. So if you want to go, get them. But I want to make this very, very clear that I'm not making money off this. This is a fundraiser. All of the proceeds for this event go to Miss Julie's School of Beauty, a nonprofit cosmetology school in Rochester that serves strictly at-risk students who are victims of sex trafficking. And they will earn a cosmetology degree, and then they'll be interviewed for permanent jobs. And I shared this a couple days ago on the podcast, and several people reached out and said, hey, I live in California, I live somewhere else, or I can't make it to the event, but I would love to support Miss Julie's School of Beauty. I'm also going to put a link in today's show notes where you can go right to the page for Miss Julie's School of Beauty, and you can donate right to them and help a very, very worthy cause. And so I'm thrilled, mostly for the opportunity to help the school. I believe firmly in the cause that they have, and I want to help. I think that's a great place to help, but also I can't wait to meet people and say hello. And it's always so cool to meet people who consume the podcast. And I want to meet you because I want to say thank you for listening. Honestly, that's what it comes down to. I want to extend that thank you and shake hands and meet people that listen to me talk. It means the world to me if you listen to this podcast, and I want to extend my gratitude to you as well. So if you're there at the Focus Theater, I would love to see you there. We're also going to do an event with Pat Moran Thursday night at Sunny Reds in Lackawanna. We'll share more details on that next week. But if you see me in town, you're at camp, say hello. I'd love to meet you. I'd love to thank you for listening. So don't be shy, and look forward to connecting, and then have a little something else prepared in a few weeks in the area that I'll let you know about. But, I live in Charlotte, North Carolina, but I try to have a bit of a presence when I can in Western New York, and I'll make you aware of some opportunities, and there's a couple for you next week. All right, little herd mentality. You know the drill here. You send in the questions, the comments, the takes, whatever you have, and I'll comment on them here. So let's do it. First one comes from Bub. Bub's a buddy of mine and celebrated a birthday last week. So happy birthday, Bub. Bub says, what position room do you believe is the most competitive, healthy room? In other words, if you could have that makeup in every position room, which one would it be? All right, so I had this question for a few days, and my answer was cornerback. And after today, I feel even better that cornerback is my answer, where just this makeup of what you have, I think is ideal for any position group, where you have a young stud and Christian Benford, who's wrapped up long-term, like what that guy's going to be. High caliber player. You got a first-round draft pick in Max Harrison with a high pedigree, rookie season. You got Trey White, who obviously has all the know-how in the world, that has massive incentives to go out and have a great year. You've got Dane Jackson, who's been a good depth player for you for a long time, that's battling for a role. Dorian Strong, a late-round pick that probably got underdrafted and, probably gives you this profile to do a lot of different things and play teams and give you versatility with coverage. That feels like he could be a steal later in the draft. Jamarcus Ingram, who's been a practice squad guy that got in the 53, that has become a very good special teams player that's versatile. He's battling for a job. Not to mention DaQuan Hardy and Brandon Codrington. Then you get to the slot, and it's Taron Johnson, who's an all-pro caliber player, with another guy that's paved his path in Cam Lewis that's fighting for a job, because Jordan Hancock, who's a younger, bigger, more athletic version of him, is chomping at the bit to make this roster. And then to Corey Couch, who's got a lot of familiarity with the corners coach, Jamila Dye, and is playing a little safety. And so I think you just have this beautiful mix of proven talent, guys that have a lot to prove, young players, everything in between. I think it's a beautiful, beautiful makeup for how this cornerback room stacks up. And hopefully that leads to really high-level performance this year. Bob says, can you comment on the rationale for so many wide receivers at camp when expected 53-man roster is 5 to 6 versus, say, the number of offensive line personnel? Do they generally keep more wide receivers on the practice squad? It seems like they have way more than they need. It's a good question. And yeah, the Bills do have a lot of receivers on the 90-man roster, and they will only keep 5 on the active roster. And like Bob said in the question, maybe 6. I think there's a number of things here. First of all, 5 is kind of a lighter number. A lot of teams will roster 6, 7 receivers. So the Bills automatically are a little bit leaner there. And they will stash several on the practice squad. It's not uncommon for them to have at least 3 on the practice squad, and they like to call them up. And, whether that's Jalen Virgil a couple times last year, Tyrell Shavers got called up a few times, KJ Hamler's, it's happened for him, Tanner Gentry throughout the years. These things will happen. So they like to use those guys as kind of fill in the blanks if they need, extra help on special teams or offense. And then when you think about the wide receiver position, it's probably the one where there's the most variety of skill sets, where guys can be, Keon Coleman, 6'3", 215, or they can be KJ Hamler, who's probably 5'9", 170 pounds, right? And everything in between. You got guys that can win deep, guys that are yards after catch players, guys that are physical possession players, right? There's so many different types of receivers. So you kind of just need more numbers to get real competition for all the different roles. So I think that would hopefully explain the rationale piece of why the Bills would have so many wide receivers on this roster. John says, I heard Josh Allen mention a receiver's body language. Also, Joe Brady mentioned it today. Can you explain what that means? Great question. So what it comes down to is knowing the intricacies of how your receivers are going to run routes, and how they're going to just execute certain assignments, so that you have a good feel for the timing and what they're thinking, so that you're on the same page, so that you can get, completions, right? So that you can optimize your opportunities of targeting that player. So body movements, right? Body language, it speaks to creating the expectations and how they're going to get in and out of a break, and how they're going to leverage certain releases on certain routes against certain coverages, or how they're going to beat press coverage Or, if they're having to run a vertical route and they're facing off coverage, what that's going to look like, because that's going to give them the chemistry necessary to be on the same page to maximize targets. So that's what it comes down to. It's about being on the same page at a high level. This is professional football in the National Football League. The margins are really, really slim. And if you can intimately know how Josh Palmer is going to run an in cut, and that's going to help your timing, that body language and being on the same page is going to make you a more cohesive connection throwing the football. And so that's what that comes down to. All right, some really cool stuff coming up the rest of the way, including a question about why you should be excited to watch preseason games. I'll sell you on that and a whole lot more next. So folks, be sure to stick with me. This episode is presented by Yahoo Fantasy. Fantasy football is back. Fire up the group chat, get your draft board ready, and buckle up for a season filled with breakouts, busts, and all the overreactions we live for. It's all going down on Yahoo Fantasy. This year I'm playing on Yahoo Fantasy, and you should too, whether you're a first-timer or you're a vet that's making your 1 millionth league. I've used Yahoo Fantasy for years and love how smooth the draft day experience is, and my leagues have been running through Yahoo for a while now. The setup is easy, the mobile app is awesome, and the smack talk hits just a little different on the message boards. To celebrate 28 years of fantasy greatness, Yahoo Fantasy is dropping 28 big new features over 28 days, giving you more ways to play, more ways to draft, and more ways to win. It all begins on August 4th. So stay tuned and get started by creating or joining a Yahoo Fantasy Football League at yahoofantasy.com/LockedOnNFL. That's yahoofantasy.com/LockedOnNFL, and let's make this fantasy season the best one yet. All right, folks, welcome back. Got a couple more herd mentality items to get into. Let's do this one from Hank. Hank says, can you help me get excited to watch preseason games? So, well, of course, we all want classic Josh Allen, Shakir, Knox, Benford, Bosa, and Rousseau football, but got to settle for preseason games in the meantime. Unfortunately, it never scratches the same itch. Can you tell me what it is you're watching to help me get into it? What to keep an eye on? What to look for, any under-the-radar position battles? I'm interested in Mitch Trubisky versus Mike White, maybe some rookies, but besides that, I'm at a bit of a loss. Well, I mean, there's 91 football players on the Buffalo Bills roster, and I'm interested in all 91 of them. And we've watched this team play seasons year after year, and I think we've learned that it takes the entire roster. You never know when it's going to be Week 3 against the Miami Dolphins, and Jamarcus Ingram has to play an important role, and he's going to get 2 interceptions. You never know if, Micah Hyde's going to go down late in the season, and Taylor Rapp's going to have to come in, and the Bills are going to have to change the way they play defense, and you have a dime package, and, all these different things that have happened. Trent Sherfield with that huge catch at the end of the year a couple years ago against Miami, right? Like, we've seen this roster depth show up. It's important. You need everybody. So get familiar with everybody that's going to matter in this quest of going all the way. Guys are going to get their chance. Like that's just the inevitability of the NFL. Like you're gonna beat Ryan Vandermark, and you're gonna wake up one day and Spencer Brown's not going to be able to play against the Kansas City Chiefs, and you got to go beat a right tackle. It's so important. I mean, last year, think about the defense. Is it Greg Rousseau? Was it Greg Rousseau and DaQuan Jones were the only two defensive starters that didn't miss at least one game due to injury? Guys are going to play. So get acquainted. And, I mean, you hear me talk about this offensive line depth in this pipeline. If preseason didn't exist, there'd be no reason to be excited about it because you wouldn't know. But seeing Tylen Grable last year, I was ahead of the Ryan Vandermark arc where I was kind of hyping him up after watching him in preseason as well. Alec Anderson, same type thing. You want to see if Cedric Van Pran-Granger can succeed Connor McGovern? Find out. Your best chance to find out is going to be the preseason. You mentioned the QB2 battle is absolutely legit. We got so many young players in this D-line, not just the rookies, but Dwayne Carter, Javon Solomon, secondary battles all over, the corners and safeties. I want to see it play out. So, I mean, I couldn't be more excited about the preseason games. All 22 reviews, what's coming. So hopefully that helps, but it's going to take a whole lot more than 53 players for the Bills to go on the run that they're about to go on. Khan says, why didn't the Bills offer Reggie Gilliam a longer contract? Could this mean Jackson Hawes is a potential candidate to transition to fullback? Or are they in the market for drafting a replacement for Gilliam in the next draft? I didn't think much of this when it came through. But your question prompted me to kind of do some research here. The Bills signed Reggie Gilliam to a 1-year, $2 million contract. There's only 4 fullbacks in the entire NFL that are not on a rookie deal that have a multi-year contract. That's it, 4. Alec Ingold, Nick Bellore, Kyle Juszczyk, and CJ Ham. And Reggie's last deal with the Bills was a 2-year deal. So I think it's just kind of the position, right? They're low-cost players, unless you're like Ingold or Juszczyk or Ham, who are like identity pieces for what those teams are. This is just kind of the nature of that position. So I don't think you should read anything into it. I don't think Jackson Hawes is going to transition to fullback. I feel like we've had that conversation with so many different tight ends. I feel like I've answered that question about Quentin Morris, if that was something he can do. I think it's different. I think it's really different roles. So I don't think it means anything other than it's a 1-year deal, and they'll probably re-sign him to the exact same deal next year. Rooks says, with camp around the corner, this is a pre- and post-camp question that we'll come back to, pertaining specifically to opening day against the Ravens. Who on our revamped D-line do you have starting and why? Does DaQuan Jones take a rotation spot and one of the rookies start over him? Which side are you starting, Bosa and Groot? I'm curious to know what your thoughts and game plan for Jackson and Henry with our new look D-line. Well, I think this is a game where the D-line is going to be stressed massively. The Ravens run scheme is amazing. They averaged 192 rushing yards per game last year, including the playoffs. They showed up. I mean, those guys showed up with 200 yards rushing, basically. And, we saw that week 4, week 5, something like that, the Bills' first matchup against Baltimore last year. They came in with a lot of creative wrinkles prepared specifically for the Bills to take advantage of kind of their up-the-field approach with those wham blocks, and had some unscouted looks that the Bills had to deal with on the fly. And, that's a tough assignment. And so I think this is a game where the starters are going to have to play a little bit more. And when I say starters, I say DaQuan Jones and Ed Oliver on the interior. I mean, especially DaQuan Jones. He's going to have to play a ton in that game. And on the edge, it'd be Rousseau and Epinesa would be my starters. I think Epinesa, his growth as a run defender was pretty evident last year. And then, of course, I would play Bosa. But, if you think of the defensive end position as 200% of snaps, right? Because you have 2 spots, 100% of snaps at each. I think you're going to want between Epinesa, Rousseau, and Bosa, you're going to want like 175% of those snaps encapsulated in those 3 players. And then you lean into Landon Jackson as the other guy. That's a tough assignment for his first NFL game. It's a very creative, dynamic run scheme, and I want my veterans on the field as much as possible. Same thing on the interior, where I think Jones and Oliver have to play a ton. And then I'd probably play Dwayne Carter the next most because he's seen this. He's game planned for this defense and played against it. He game planned twice and played against it once. And then, you got to feel out Sanders and Walker, but, those are the types of players that run scheme will just go right after. So it's a tough week 1 assignment, especially for this defensive line, especially with all the young guys. That's why one of my schedule wish lists was that Baltimore would happen later in the season so that you'd have Hoyt, Ogunjobi, but that's just not the way it goes. So you got to lean into the experience, I think, against Baltimore. And then, the schedule does lighten up a little bit. And I think you can, play your younger guys a little bit more in the next 5 games before the bye. So it's a tough assignment for sure, but I'm leaning into all the veterans that I possibly can for Baltimore. And it's look, the Bills are going to give up rushing yards to Baltimore. They're going to. It's not going to be a great measuring stick of what the Bills' run defense is actually going to look like, because they gave up. Everybody got yards on Baltimore last year. Or excuse me, everybody gave up rushing yards to Baltimore, 192 a game. So, tough assignment. All right, folks, that's it for today. I can't wait to get on the road, leaving Saturday, driving up Saturday, and then I'll be at practice Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. They're off Wednesday, but we have the event Wednesday night. Back at practice Thursday, and then I'll be at the Blue Red on Friday at Highmark Stadium. So if you see me, say hello. I hope I can see you at the Focus Theater. If not, the Sunny Reds. If not that, the Blue Red. And we'll keep going through this training camp, talking you through it every step of the way. So That's going to do it for us here today, folks. Thanks for being here. As always, I kindly ask that you share, subscribe, rate, and review. Have a great rest of your day. Go Bills, and I look forward to catching up with you again real soon.